Okay. Welcome everyone to today's Connections seminar presented by Terry Ord and Nora Campbell, titled Asynchronous is Not a Dirty Word, Maximising Engagement in Online Learning, which I think is a topic that we're all really keen to learn more about. Can I ask for the next slide, please? So I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Gadigal people, traditional custodians of the land on which I come to you from, and pay my respects to their elders past and present. I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. I'd like to introduce our speakers. So we have Terry Ord, an Associate Professor in the School of Biological, Earth and Environmental Sciences. And Terry has won a UNSW Vice Chancellor's Award for outstanding contributions to student learning. We also have Nora Campbell, a former undergraduate student at UNSW and now a PhD candidate studying social behaviour and conservation of kangaroos. In this session, we'll save all questions for the end. And there'll be plenty of time for a Q&A after that. Over to you. Thanks, Terry and Nora.
Hi, everyone. So, so I guess...
You've accidentally put yourself on mute.
So I've gone muted. Sorry about that.
What do you guess?
This is, you know, it's classic, isn't it? You spend all this time teaching online and you can't remember to unmute yourself. So, so I'm just going to start off with just explaining this opening graphic. So there's this notion that when we're presenting asynchronous content to students, and I'll define that in just a moment, that, you know, we're effectively opening up this kind of competition for student attention because, you know, they may just not get engaged. They prefer to be watching Netflix, for example, or perhaps going off and finishing off the laundry or whatever it might be. So, you know, I just want to sort of answer that question very basically at the outset and come back to this towards the end. It's basically our students are adults, right? So we should treat them as such. But what I'm going to talk to you today about is some of the things that we've done in our courses to kind of maximise this engagement thing, right? Because if you get the students engaged, everything else essentially follows: motivation, fostering a learning community and deeper learning and all those sorts of things, which we'll get to in just a moment. So the way I'm going to structure the talk is you're going to have to put up with me rabbiting on for about half an hour, and then I'm going to take it from the context of course design as an educator, and then I'm going to bat it over to Nora, who's going to talk from the student experience. Which the reality is that as educators, we're talking backwards and forwards between ourselves, and what we really should be doing is getting that student voice back into our discussions about what works and what doesn't, just to sort of really, you know, make sure that we're doing the right thing. So that'll be in about sort of half an hour's time, I suppose. So who am I? I am in the Evolution and Ecology Research Centre. We're in the School of Biological, Earth and Environmental Sciences. So I teach into all levels from first through to third year undergraduate courses. I'm going to primarily talk to you about what we've been doing in the third year course, which I've got highlighted up on the screen here, which is the animal behaviour course. Most of the teaching that we do in the school is team taught, so I'm usually teaching with at least 2 other educators as well. And the courses that I teach into are small to about moderate size in terms of enrolment, so 40 to as much as 150 students. Up until recently, it's all been traditional face-to-face, very hands-on types of teaching. So this is biology courses where we're actually doing practicals, where obviously we're doing hands-on training and illustrating concepts through practical active participation. Now, however, it's online. Certainly for the animal behaviour course, it's exclusively online. The other thing I want to mention is I'm not an EF, so I don't have a network. I don't plug into the education network. I don't have a lot of resources. I'm just like every other academic, I suppose, in the university. So the point I want to make is what I'm doing is not particularly new or novel, and also if I can do it, pretty much anyone can do it, right? So, you know, not really that special. So this kind of defining of terms, synchronous, what is that? So that's the same content being delivered at the same time. So this would be your traditional face-to-face. So all the students in the one room and you're delivering content to all those students at the same time. But these days it also includes live online teaching, or, you know, what's being pushed a lot at the moment, which is the whole hybrid learning. So it's live, right? I won't get started on my opinions about hybrid teaching, but the general belief is that you've got to be synchronous to, if it's online, because you can maximise that flexibility, the students can access that content anywhere, but because it's all synchronous, it's live, then you automatically can have that engagement and having that learning community. Don't subscribe to that. And the flip side of that same coin is this assumption of asynchronous teaching, which is basically on demand. It's the same content, but students can access it anywhere because it's online, but at any time as well. Now there's this belief that this kind of results in poor motivation, so high flexibility, poor motivation, disengagement, and a sense of isolation, so zero learning community. So, you know, you've got a picture of me with a pre-recorded lecture, students dozing off in front of it, if they're even watching it and deciding to go off and do the laundry or watch Netflix. So I wanted to dispel that myth at the outset. A lot of data is going to be shown in the talk. So this is my experience overall satisfaction scores for this course, third year animal behaviour course. I've been teaching this thing for over a decade, which was a bit of a shock just to realise that putting this course together. You can see that it's generally pretty popular. It bounces around a bit, but in recent times, there's this been gradual decline, reaching an all-time low in 2017. So we weren't doing anything different, right? The content was not changing. The educators weren't really changing either. So something was happening here. Now, you know, for those of you who have been teaching at UNSW for a while or somewhere else, you would have probably been aware that over the years we've had this progressive decrease in student attendance at lecture theatres. So when I first started teaching at UNSW back in 2010, you know, you typically get at least 2/3 to 3/4 of the students attending at a lecture. By about sort of 2017, you would be doing well if you were getting at least 1/3 of the class turning up to your lectures. And, you know, animal behaviour was a pretty popular course to begin with, but, you know, it wasn't unusual for lecturers to turn up to only 2 or 3 students in a very large lecture theatre. And so that's what, there's this been downward disengagement with students, at least with the traditional kind of didactic presentation, which is what I'm doing right now. So from 2017 onwards, we changed a few things. And you can see that, you know, there's this almost linear increase to the point that last year we had the highest overall student satisfaction in my experience. In 2020 and 2021, the course was entirely asynchronous and online. So you can see that we were getting satisfaction rates that are higher asynchronous online than we were when we were doing it the old school way, where we're all in a room and having discussions and things like that. So what did we do? Well, the challenge, basically, when I sort of looked at that data for 2017 is, well, what do I want to do? What do I want to really achieve out of redesigning this course? And those bullet points are up there. So flexibility, accessibility, engagement, motivation, relevance, fostering deeper learning, fostering a learning community. Now, this is not online teaching specific. This is just good teaching, right? This is just good education. This is all the sort of stuff that we kind of want to do. So nothing new there, I suppose. Looks pretty daunting, but I'll break them down and I'll show what we did at each stage to try and address these different things. The very first thing, flexibility. Going asynchronous online is the most maximum flexibility you can provide to students, right? It's on demand. They can access it anywhere at any time. So by doing asynchronous, you automatically hit that flexibility mark. The thing is, though, structure is key. Deadlines matter, and students like having deadlines and they have things to work towards. If they have a structure that fosters this kind of motivation to actually access the content and do what we hope they're going to be doing with that content. So the way we did this in the course is we had a whole bunch of pre-recorded lectures, nothing new there, and we grouped these into modules. So students were expected to watch, 3 to 4 lectures per module. That module was open for 2 to 3 weeks. So they had flexibility in being able to watch those lectures whenever they wanted to in that period. But there was still a deadline. At the close of the forum, close of that module, there's expectation that the students would need to access a forum activity where they were required to post at least 2 questions on the content of the lectures that they just watched. It could be a question, something they weren't too sure about. It could be a thought bubble. And they're also expected to answer 2 questions from other students that have been posted in the course as well. So what happens is, so we've got this video about how it kind of works here and what it kind of looks like. There's a rate function there that students can rate particular posts. That's really interesting, or I had the same thought, do I need a little bit more information? So they get immediate feedback from their peers in that context as well. But really what this is it's a forum, but really it's a reflection piece. We're getting them to reflect on this, the content in the lectures. So this is kind of one of the main strategies for fostering deeper learning, right? And also because it's this forum exercise, it fosters peer interaction. So it fosters this kind of learning community. The other thing that we do is we get them at the opening of the forum and right at the start of the course, we get them to post a very short introductory videos, just designed to just put a face to a name. I group the students into small study groups of about 8 to 10 students, and they stay in that study group for that forum exercise through the entire course. So they really get to know each other, they get familiar with each other, they feel it's a safe environment, and so you'll find that you'll get these quite substantial discussions occurring. In fact, they typically go well beyond the expectations for this forum. They're actually accessing content, researching stuff online to post in the discussion. There's a lot of multi-student discussions going on in this forum as well. So I know forums have a really bad rap, but if you put it in a kind of a very structured way and you're thoughtful about it, it really works. And the intro videos, just anything. Hi, my name's Terry. I'm reading this book and I'm watching this program. You can see up the top there, there's the educators do that as well. So my 2 other wonderful co-educators in the course, so Lisa and Rob, they take the time to put their own introductory videos as well. So they get to see who we are. I deliberately do it at home. So that's my son's drum kit in the background to sort of make, myself a little bit more accessible rather than sitting in office, wearing a shirt or something like that, just, being unapproachable perhaps. So this is all based on pre-recorded lectures, right? So they're expected to watch these pre-recorded lectures. So I actually looked at the analytics. So we just recorded these in Echo 360, the standard 45-minute, 50-minute lectures. And I had a look at who was watching and for how long. So this is what the data on the screen is here. So at the start of the course in module 1, we were getting maybe about 2/3 to 3/4 watching the entire lecture. And, there's probably about 1/4 of the students that are watching less than half. And there are some students that are not watching the lecture at all. Now, by the end of the course for module 4, those viewing rates dropped even more dramatically. So I don't know about you, but when I saw this, I was a bit shocked and dismayed. It was like, oh my God, what can you do? So this is that myth rearing its ugly head of disengagement, right? Or is it? This is students being very strategic in their time. They're watching the lectures that they want to, and they're getting enough of that content to then participate in that forum exercise, right? Now, I'd like to say that they would start watching my lectures, they would be so enthralled by about 20 minutes into it, they'd start researching stuff online and accessing the forum and all that sort of stuff. But, that's a bit of a mug's game trying to think that. They're just being very strategic. And that's kind of, you think about it, it's kind of sensible. We're busy people, they're busy people as well. So I wasn't going to read too much into it in terms of, am I that boring? So there is this kind of trend back to that kind of olden days with a dwindling engagement with students not turning up to the lectures as well. So maybe it's a symptom, just a, you know, transfer of that face-to-face symptom, and it's in the online environment. You might have seen this article in the Chronicle of Higher Education a few months ago, the stunning level of student disconnection. Now, this article is actually about specifically the impacts of COVID on students, but there was a lot in here that basically I just felt we've been dealing with as educators pre-COVID. This is, you know, students not turning up to lecture, you know, all these sorts of things. So I don't think a lot of this has to do with COVID. I think it's just, you know, things are changing. So back to these lectures, you know, what are you going to do? You're going to do asynchronous, so it has to be on demand. So we ditched it. We ditched the Echo 360 and we tried something different. We bit the bullet, went into the studio. Now, there are issues about doing that. I won't go into details. We basically recorded short snippets of video of our content, 5 to 10 minutes. And then we got a lot of help from our educator facilitators in the Faculty of Science. Stephen Parker's crew basically are awesome. They wedded these studio videos with HP5 to create these interactive lectures. So it's same content, but now we've got little activities. So the really classic way of doing it is kind of this, what I call lecture sandwich. So many of you would have done all these endless inductions that we're supposed to do online for whatnot, ergonomics or whatever it is, and it's basically all HP5 interactive stuff, right? So if I learned anything from those inductions, it was like, wow, you can use HP5 to do all sorts of really cool interactive stuff. So you would have me talking, for example, on some concept where I'm introducing an idea, might elaborate it on a little bit, and then that video would stop, and then students would actually have to engage with their computer to then complete a short activity. It could be a drag and drop thing, could be a pairing up thing, could be a multiple choice, whatever it is. It's designed to essentially just reinforce what was being taught in that video, or perhaps extend beyond that. So it's really pretty straightforward. It's not anything more revolutionary than that. The other thing is this lecture choose your own adventure. Now, this is something that my colleague Mike Kuzumovic, who's in the chat line there, introduced me to. It's a really awesome way of self-directing lectures. This is an interactive lecture where basically students get to choose where they go in the lecture. So if you don't know what a choose your own adventure book was, I used to love them when I was a kid. This was my favourites up on the screen here. You basically start reading through the story and you get to a point where you've got to make a decision. If you want to go left in the Cave of Time, you go to that page in the book. If you want to go right in the Cave of Time, you go to a separate page, and you continue on and you go, and basically you're creating your own plot line. They're kind of awesome. What on earth would this look like in terms of a lecture? This is me talking about a animal navigation. So I'm using a specific case study of ants in the Sahara, and it's basically introducing this idea that animals have to know which way's home, direction, and how far, and then students get to choose about, well, what do you think they need to know about direction? So click on this one or click on that one. It'll go to another video, and I would then elaborate on that particular choice. Right or wrong, doesn't really matter, because it's really kind of getting them to explore it. They go back and choose the other option, and the lecture progresses. So it sounds quite complicated, but as long as you storyboard it out, it's actually quite achievable. It doesn't work for everything, but for a lot of content, it's a really wonderful way to create these choose your own adventure lectures that really kind of instill this engagement in that content. The other way to establish engagement, of course, is maximize relevance. Again, this is not something that's related specific to online teaching, but look, if you're going to go asynchronous, embrace the fact that it is asynchronous and it's online. So you can do all these wonderful things if you acknowledge the fact that it's a different format. So I created these lectures from the field series. They're just short little things. Whenever I used to go out to the field to do some sort of study, I would take the time to record the lecture. So for this example, I'm in the swamp forest in Borneo. I've actually got mud on my face and, you know, I'm not looking the best, but what it is illustrating that their educator is an active researcher in this case. And I then introduce a concept that's related to the fieldwork that I'm doing, and then I talk about that fieldwork. So I'm also elaborating techniques that you might need to do or know to be able to study, in this case, animal behaviour with wild animals, right? So it's establishing that relevance. It's also establishing accessibility to some extent for me. And so I recorded a series of these, and these are about, you know, 5 of them, and then there's a short low stakes quiz at the end of it. The other way is to do that classic example of case studies. You know, this is, again, nothing new here, but because it's asynchronous and it's online, leverage that. What I did was I solicited case studies from world experts on a particular concept. So the big screen here is Professor Daniel Bernstein from UCLA, who's, you know, world renowned for why studying animal behaviour is really important for conservation, and he agreed to do a short case study. So the point is that I got 6 world experts, and so it introduces how, you know, the content relevance to the students, but also, and this is the really important thing, it introduces the diversity of people that study this, these active researchers. So we've got a range of different faces here. We've also got a range of different levels. We've got early career researchers and also senior researchers. So students get exposed to that diversity, right? Which is always a good thing. It's not just me raving on away. It's just, you know, this discipline is a lot more diverse than that. And it's likely to be, you know, wow, that person looks like me, right? So the last thing, so I've basically covered all of the things on the screen here except for one, and this is the accessibility thing. Now, accessibility can mean a bunch of different things to a bunch of different people, but in this context, I'm going to talk about it from the language background. So this year, I took the opportunity to do a pre-course survey. So this is the results of those pre-course surveys for the course this year. And it's essentially an icebreaker. So it's basically, I had introduced myself again. This is a different avenue of introducing myself to the students compared to the video that I mentioned before. Something about my personal life, you know, basically a single parent, you might see kids wandering around in the background, just to sort of alert them to that. And then I would, you know, ask them a question, is there anything that you feel like I should know about you that may impact you taking this course? Is there something about the course that you're anxious about? All those sorts of things. One of the questions towards the end is, what is your first language? And so the results are up on the screen here. Now, 2/3 of the students didn't have English as their first language. So I acknowledge that UNSW has this policy that everybody's expected to learn their course content in English. There are also, many of them have to take English language tests. And there's always this attitude, well, that's it, right? So we shouldn't have to cater for these students. But I have to say, regardless, if English is not your first language, doesn't matter how fluent you are, to a lesser or greater degree, you're going to be at a disadvantage, particularly in courses that are got terminology in them, right? So I think this is a bit of a problem. How do you address that? So this is a third of class, right? We actually have a whole bunch of students that are not even in Australia. So, you know, it goes to time zones and another advantage of being asynchronous as well. So this is a very complex subject, and I'm just going to be very cursory about it, I admit. But I was able to get a student experience grant from the Faculty of Science that was awesome, that allowed me to put subtitles onto these lectures. And it's just a pilot at this stage, and we use the demographic of previous years to figure out which languages should we focus on, simplified Chinese and traditional Chinese. but also English captions. Now, these are highly accurate English captions. These are not YouTube things that, tend to be a bit flaky. What it turns out is that I haven't, of course, it's still running right now, so I don't have any of the analytics to show you yet, but I can show you, say to you that a third of the class are accessing either the English captions or the subtitled versions of these lectures. And as I've already shown, a third of the class don't have English as their first language. So that's a pretty good matchup. So they're certainly using it. It'd be really interesting to see how well it's going in terms of, is it being useful for them? All right, so waffled on a bit. Does this mean anything? It's just Terry talking his opinion. Does it work? My experience results would suggest that the students certainly think so. I've already presented some of this data already. In terms of the learning community, this is the big myth that people think if you go asynchronous, there's no learning community. You can see that linear increase from 2017 right up to a peak of last year. And that was asynchronous fully online. Course resources are effectively the same as well. So I can cherry pick those different things, but students seem to think it really works, the strategies that we've adopted. Made a point of doing some peer reviews as well. There's the results up on the screen here. So other educators think so as well. So if it's yellow or green, it's effective or very effective. In the transition year of 2019, we were still doing a bit of face-to-face and was doing a bit of online. It was a bit mixed. It was still a transition, but certainly last year, everything was rated as very effective. So I would take that as a definite evidence. And of course, I guess what we really want to know is the assessed learning outcome, and the marks certainly say so. Went from 2017, the median was a credit in the course. When we went asynchronous online and adopted many of the strategies I've talked to you about, the median was hovering around an HD or a distinction. So evidence suggests that it does actually work. So what I'm going to do now is go over to the student voice, because that's probably something that matters a lot more. So Nora was an undergraduate from 2018 to 2020. So she's got a lot of experience of taking courses, both from the face-to-face context and the online courses as well. Most of it's science, but it's a whole range of different subject areas as well. And as we already know, she's a PhD candidate in biology, and she's going to take it from the student perspective. So I'm just going to hand over.
Hi, so I'm Nora, and like Terry said, in 2020, when online learning became mainstream in Australia, I was in my 4th and final year of my undergraduate science and arts degree. So I did 2 terms of partial online learning and 2 terms fully online, and that's overall 11 courses, including animal behaviour, either partially or fully online in the arts and science faculties. So today I'll be sharing from a student's perspective some of the things about online and asynchronous learning that I thought did and didn't work. Just a quick note, all of my points are specific to online learning in a pandemic environment where I was in lockdown for the most of it, but I think that a lot of my points are still relevant for students in other online environments, such as those who are working from another country or maybe you're at home looking after children. So I'll start with the things that I found didn't work. The most notable mistake that I saw made was not modifying the course and exam structures for online learning. The traditional format of a weekly lecture followed by a tutorial with a lot of group work and discussion might work really well in person, but online it can quickly get overwhelming. I'll talk a bit about online lectures later, but tutorials and labs in particular I found just didn't work as well online as they did in person, because it's a lot harder to work with other students and facilitate meaningful discussion online. Splitting the class up into groups and giving them a vague discussion topic just won't lead to the same depth of discussion that you might get in person. I felt like online tutorials and labs worked far better if they were well structured, with every single activity and discussion technique appropriated specifically for online learning. The next thing I want to talk about is the overuse of breakout rooms. A lot of my early 2020 university experience involved being constantly thrown into breakout rooms multiple times a week or even a day. You could get a chatty group and then you'd have a wonderful discussion, or you could just get a bunch of people who didn't want to talk. And if there wasn't enough to discuss in the time given, a breakout room session almost always turned into the latter. Short breakout rooms with a purpose were fine, but adding them into everything just to increase student engagement I found to be quite counterproductive. The breakout sessions that I thought worked best were the ones with a short time limit, so say maybe 5 to 10 minutes, and a structured relevant topic for discussion, maybe a series of questions or a short task to be completed in that time. They can be utilised well, but breakout rooms on their own aren't really a substitute for student engagement. So perhaps a controversial topic, but my third point is about camera policies. Not everybody feels comfortable with their cameras on during an online class. It's an intimate look into a student's private space, one that might not be the cleanest or that they could be sharing with a family member. I understand that looking at 30 blank screens, it can be easy to imagine that no one's paying attention, but the image on the screen shows everything else that could be going on. When you have your camera on, you have to look at yourself as well as your classmates, and it just added a lot of pressure that wasn't there on campus. Personally, I don't always wear makeup to university, but when I did my courses online, the morning light that came through the window of the room I was using to study just made me look really weird on camera. So I felt there was an added pressure to take extra care with my appearance just to look normal in an online class. It can also be really distracting for everyone's camera to be on during lectures when all you need to really be doing is looking at the lecturer and their screen. There were definitely lots of times I felt happy to have my camera on, but there were also a few times that it just made me really uncomfortable. I think though what it comes down to is that university students are adults. If they're not engaged in the course, then they're wasting their own time and their own money, which sucks, but it is their choice. And finally, nothing can ruin a course faster than a lack of lecturer engagement. To run a successful online course, you really require a level of engagement that you wouldn't need in person, especially if the course is asynchronous. Running a lecture or tutorial and then remaining absent for the rest of the week and taking forever to reply to emails will likely alienate students and prevent them from asking any questions that aren't really, really important. Furthermore, in an online environment, students are more likely to need help. They could be dealing with mental health issues or burnout, both of which I've seen expanded by the isolation that comes with online learning. So the students need to feel comfortable emailing the lecturer about small questions or asking for extensions on a deadline due to some external circumstances. Seeing the lecturer be involved in the course and feeling like you know them a little can really make that a lot easier. And so now for the positives. I had some amazing courses which adapted extremely well to online learning. Of course, it was harder for the classes that I did in term 1 of 2020 because they had to go online entirely within a week, so I did not judge them at all. The best courses that I did online were the ones that were the most organised. Any student can attest that organisation can really make or break a course in terms of its difficulty or enjoyability. But when it comes to online learning, organisation really reaches a new level of importance. When you can't just ask the person sitting next to you to clarify when the quiz is or what the assignment's about, easy access to course information is essential. On top of this, knowing everything you need to do in the course from day one just makes it so much easier to organise yourself and then to stay on top of your work. Student planning is really important when it comes to asynchronous learning, but that definitely starts with course planning. And it's also worth mentioning that if there's the good course organisation, it can help avoid the course coordinator from getting the same 30 emails from students every week. So second, and this isn't exclusive to online courses, but it's probably more beneficial to them, having structured yet asynchronous deadlines. Terry's already talked a lot about this, so I won't say too much, but you really do need structure in an online course, but you also don't want your students to be overwhelmed. Having a few huge exams or assignments due at the end of term is a lot more difficult when you're learning online, and large projects like that can really loom over you, especially if you're having trouble structuring your days. When you don't leave the house as much, the days sort of blend together and time's a lot more difficult to keep track of. But at the same time, going in the opposite direction and having a task due at a specific time every day wasn't really the best solution. At least for me, I found that having things due at the end of each week worked best. I had a deadline that I could work in, but I could also structure my learning around my own personal schedule. On a similar note, breaking graded content into small, easy to manage sections allows for a really low stress learning environment with a high level of course engagement. So like Terry talked about, in animal behavior, there was a short quiz after each video lecture and was worth, I think, about 2%. It was an easy grade, but only if you watched the entire video. So it ensured that the students paid attention. And also having a checklist of easy to complete tasks for a course made you feel really productive, which helped to feel positive about the rest of the course. Online learning often comes with a lack of motivation, and it's not always a student's fault. If you can't leave the house to exercise or get some sun, or you're stuck with the same people 24/7, it can really weigh you down and add to the stress of university. Short quizzes and assessments worth a small amount of marks aren't really overwhelming, and they can be done in a student's own schedule. So like with my previous point, it's already harder to do online learning, so it's important to make things easy and manageable for people who might have different needs and schedules. And finally, perhaps the best thing that I think that came out of online learning is the normalization of recorded lectures. Some of my classes had already included them, but 2020 was the first time that they completely replaced in-person lectures for me. Being able to pause a lecture to make notes or rewind and go back to something you missed is invaluable. I did like going to uni, grabbing a coffee and then sitting down to listen to a lecture in person, but I would often end up watching the recorded lectures anyway for things that I might have missed. Once uni went online, I found that the online lectures just didn't hold my attention as well as the in-person ones did, and I always preferred to watch a recorded lecture. Recorded lectures are also easy to slot into the time that you have available, so you can watch them in bed or on the couch or maybe while eating lunch and never miss anything. So I think that overall I had a really positive online experience, although it was quite difficult when combined with the pandemic. So to give a takeaway message, I think that the two most important things a lecturer can do to create a successful online learning experience is to increase engagement and organization within the course, and to provide compassion and understanding towards the students and the individual circumstances that they might be going through. So now I'll pass it back to Terry, who I think is just going to finish up.
All right, checking that I'm muted this time. Look, yeah, like I said, you know, the student voice really counts, right? We were all talking backwards and forwards amongst ourselves. So it's really nice to actually have a student giving their 2 cents. So I think it's really important we try and actually, you know, do this a lot more. As Nora said, I'll just give a few last potentially controversial thoughts. The first one is about the breakout rooms. Like I said, I'm not an EF, but if I would attend workshops or read stuff online about how do you maximize engagement in online teaching, it's always about breakout rooms, breakout rooms, breakout rooms. So breakout rooms really do work, but you have to be very selective about it. Students need to be comfortable with each other. They need to know each other, essentially. There also has to be a clear reason why the breakout room's occurring. So as Nora said, you've got to have, you know, posing questions seems quite straightforward, but actually posing the right question, it's like multiple choice quizzes. They're really hard to actually do. They're really hard, deceptively hard. So I necessarily think that, you know, if you're using breakout rooms, perhaps just reassess about what's your primary motivation for doing so, because the students are very tired of it. So this is I heard this is my thought to begin with, and I had a discussion with Nora, and she was like, I was like, wow. So yeah, it seems to be a bit of a thing. I know already, just scanning the stuff in the chat, that the whole camera on and off thing, it's a prickly issue. And I just want to reaffirm what Carol said in the chat. It's, as an educator, there's nothing more disconcerting than talking to a bunch of initials on the screen. I know there was a suggestion there about putting profile images up there, but you know, that only alleviates the problem to an extent. So I get it. I totally get it. You know, I'm not advocating that we should have our cameras on or off either way, but it's really complicated. And I want to go back to Nora's slide about the reasons why students don't have their cameras on. It's complicated. maybe some of them are watching Netflix or, you know, putting their feet up, having a chat to whoever or doing the laundry or whatever. But, you know, I would hazard a guess that a lot of them, there's good reasons. And the other thing that Nora touched on, when we have our cameras on, this is like online, so they can be anywhere. It's their home environment. You're effectively being invited into a student's home or learning environment. And that learning environment may not be ideal for public consumption, shall we say. You're effectively introducing a whole bunch of strangers into your bedroom, for example, or wherever that you're accessing the content from. So it's complicated, right? So I don't have a solution for you other than to say it's complicated. And the other thing I will say is that online teaching wasn't invented in 2020. There's been lots of people at UNSW who've been teaching great online courses for many, many, many years. And in many aspects, all of that is been asynchronous. This whole live lecture thing is basically just kind of rearing its head in the last couple of years. And, you know, there's a cultural shift perhaps that we're still needing to make about having cameras on or off or being used to either one of them. So that's the only thing I'll add on that. This is what I mentioned right at the beginning, right? So the solution is your students are adults, right? You should just treat them as adults. If they're not accessing the content as you'd hoped, or they're doing other things, if they're sitting there gaming or doing the laundry or whatever it is, that's a decision that they're making, right? So, you know, we shouldn't try and enforce stuff to force engagement because it just doesn't work. It's like trying to force a different opinion onto somebody else. It just doesn't work. So treat your students as adults. Remember that they're adults. They're not small children. So they make their own decisions and they're independent and they're very strategic about where their time goes in as well. And this relates to the very last thing, and this is just a very obvious one, but just be nice. Now, it seems like a bit of a Mickey Mouse thing to end this talk on, but it's really important. I also get it. So you get constant emails about the same thing. It's written in the course manual. I have a video about it on the course Moodle page. You know, I've mentioned it in emails directly to them and you get the same question again. It's frustrating, right? But the attitude I have is that every interaction that I have with a student in any capacity, that slate is wiped clean, it's fresh, and I just engage with them. They're an adult, and I will just answer the question. I won't be snarky and say it's on page 15 of the course manual if you don't read it or something like that, right? It's counterproductive. You alienate yourself from the student and you just make the student feel bad. The other thing is that I've found that more often than not, students already know the answer, right? And you already kind of suspect that yourself. What they're doing is they're reaching out to you. You know, you've got students that are a bit nervous, they're a bit wary, they want to make sure they're doing the right thing and they're contacting you, asking that annoying question for the 15th time because they just want confirmation. And they, you know, not everybody's super confident in life, and some of us just need to have a little bit of hand-holding, and that's okay. So I guess that's the final point that I want to make in terms of where we're going. Here are our contact details. Feel free to contact us if you have any questions after the fact. But other than that, that's a wonderful thank you to everyone who's gone online. This is a fantastic turnout, more than I anticipated. So thank you very much. So I think what we're going to do is try and I'll answer a couple of questions via the chat. Nice work, guys. Thank you, Mike. So, God, there's so much in the chat. All right. If anybody has their hand up now, yes, I see one person's got their hand up. Feel free to ask your question while I'm trawling through.
Wonderful, thank you. Firstly, thank you for your time in preparing the presentation. It's I know there's firstly, I'm professional staff. Actually, just some context. I work as a I'm not a fan of my job title, to be honest, but it's an education staff developer. So basically I work on, I come from a teaching background, and I'm working with teaching staff in the business school in this space of teaching capabilities, and looking at them. So I know that this is like a service component, and thank you for putting in your time. It's genuinely appreciated. My question actually is around the sort of time investment that was required of you to make some of these shifts. Now, I think what's really lovely is you had that interest in student experience that went beyond, do they feel, I guess the limited view of student experiences, do they feel sort of like cotton-wooled and supported, and that sort of very like negative attitude towards experience, to looking at experience as deep quality learning. But obviously that required time, making the videos, thinking, all that very, very deep, detailed, purposeful work around structure and things like that. And, while I look at building modules that might enable staff to more simply access and themselves engage in some of this approach, I guess my two questions, given the time constraints that everyone works under, how much time did this take? Like, what is it that I'm actually asking of them, potentially? And what would you say is the best first stepping stone to take? It can be a long journey, and as long as you want to make it, but what's a really great starting point for action?
So the first one, how long does it take? How long is
a lot or simple or that kind of thing?
It's basically how long is a piece of string. It's essentially, you got to make a judgment call, right? You could do this sort of stuff forever. And look, the classic advice I suspect you'll probably give to academics or other academics talking to peers about redesigning stuff, don't do all at once. We had a 2-year transition period where we progressively introduced stuff. The reality was, this is just as I thought about it, I'd implement it. So my brain processes don't really flow that quickly. So it took me a couple of years just to get the headspace to be able to think about what I could change. COVID hit in 2020, and obviously that was a big motivation for a lot of people. But as you saw my experience scores, they were progressively going down. 2016, 2017. So I'd been meaning to try and update this. So I was reflecting a lot about how to do it. Look, time commitment, right? This is the other myth that I want to really address, and I'm glad you brought it up. It's this notion that online teaching just takes so much time, and we should just go back to face-to-face, and it's just, easier. You just book in and book out. Not true. You've still got to be engaged with your student with face-to-face teaching as well, via email and all sorts of things, office hours, whatnot. Yes, it takes time to create the content. Once it's created, at least for a few years, you could be cynical about it and say it's a set and forget exercise. You pour a lot of time in there at the beginning, and then you reap the rewards of having less time to devote to it in subsequent years. Hopefully you're updating your content to some extent within some sort of timetable. But so for me, I don't feel like I'm spending any more time teaching, and this includes having to develop the content, the new ways of delivery, than I did when I was doing face-to-face. And I really sincerely will say that, because this is a bit of a myth that I think needs to be kind of disqualified. It's a lot of work right at the beginning, but then it's less work later on down the track. So what to start with? Look, to be honest, it's students or adults, be nice. Because we're now in this day and age, if we weren't before, where we're constantly getting our time pushed backwards and forwards to all sorts of responsibilities. We're all feeling harried. We're all feeling like we can't, spend time just answering emails. We wish we were getting less emails and all those sorts of things. So it can be quite easy just to forget that you're dealing with human beings, right? Like I said, I do consciously wipe the slate clean every interaction I have with a student via email or through Blackboard Collaborate or whatever it might be. I don't make, it took some time, but I don't make preconceived ideas about what their circumstances are. It goes back to the camera thing. It's complicated. So yeah, that's the main thing. But if you wanted to like do pragmatic sort of stuff,
I mean, I know it's sort of what is it that you want to achieve, or what is sort of the pain points of your course that sort of, but I don't know if there was something maybe retrospectively, if you look back, that goes, actually, that would have been a really useful kind of like sensible place to just make that one tiny change, and like the 20% that has the greatest impact kind of thing.
You want a golden bullet?
No, not a golden bullet, but maybe some experience-based insights around which change has perhaps triggered the greatest impact in amongst all the little things, like what's been. Yeah.
I think very small things like recording myself at home, where I'm normally doing the teaching. So I don't normally work in the office for teaching because, as Michael next door attests, we don't have any soundproofing. So every time I'm teaching, everyone in the ball pit outside and next door can hear me. So it's distracting for them and it's disconcerting for me. But, you know, I have small children at home. Sometimes they're homesick and they're wandering around in the background. And it's just, you know, people just need to understand that we're working from very different environments. So, but it oddly enough, it works to your advantage because students just see you as more accessible. So they're okay about reaching out to you and asking those silly questions. And, you know, it doesn't bother me that they're asking silly questions. The fact that they're engaging by asking that question is awesome. So that's the bonus. Another quick thing, just record yourself.
Thank you.
Not in your office, outside. Like I said, I was doing field work, and not all of us can have the luxury of doing all that sort of stuff. But if you're teaching biostats like my partner Katrina over in the School of Public Health, you know, just recording yourself outside, you know, against the tree, or if you're an engineer or maths or something like that, something relating to flow dynamics, perhaps go down to the Royal and film yourself next to a creek and just, you know, incorporate it into your lecture. It's just getting you outside that very sterile environment. This is why it was a big decision for us to go into the studio, because we were effectively removing that by going into that slick format, but we did so for a variety of reasons, but just to sort of fit with the format of the HP5. I will quickly I think somebody asked in the chat just now, I remembered, how much did the subtitles actually cost? I think it was it 600 minutes? So basically it was 14 40 to 50 minute lectures, and it was about 10 grand. So it's not cheap, and each language adds on top of it. But at the end of the day, I mean, the other disadvantage of doing that is that you're putting your content in concrete, right? Because you've got subtitles. It's not easy just go in there and re-record, you know, to update something along those lines. So, you know, it's complicated. So Christina, was the change to HP5 the key to increased engagement? Don't know yet. We only introduced that this year. So I hope so, given that stats of the Echo 360. Oh my God, that was horrific. But the other thing Nora pointed out is that having the pre-recorded stuff is convenient, but just so as you know, that some students like putting you on fast forward. so they're listening to you in 1.5 times. So, because they're busy people, right? So they're being very strategic about their time. It's okay. You know, we shouldn't feel precious about our content in that sense. Have you tried a version where students had to answer something that has variability and is creative? Create your own diagram. There are platforms where you can do that. I haven't tried it. We haven't tried it. It's just because it hasn't fit with our content. But even that choose your own adventure type sort of stuff, it could be. Again, I'm going to pick on my partner, Katrina, who teaches biostats, perhaps you're introducing a statistical model and you want to, get students to explore the underlying assumptions to that model, and they could be doing choose your own adventure along that sort of thing. So I think basically just being creative about it. It's not like something that will do everything. There are limitations to it, but talk to your education person in your faculty. The PVCE SE guys, Jasper Shea, for example, are awesome. They are really good at it. If you can corner them, they're extremely busy. Stephen Parker's team in the science faculty, another great contact as well. Time investment's a lot for HP5. I didn't do it, and I don't think, to be honest, as an academic, we should be expected to learn this sort of learning technology. I know that's a controversial idea for a lot of people at the university, but we are content experts, and we shouldn't be expected to have to spend days and days and days putting HP5 content together. It is expected. I had people from Stephen Parker's team and Jasper Shea's team working on that. It is a lot, but look, the university is supposed to be plowing a lot into online teaching. This is where we're at, and it's a big deal, and so the investment needs to go in there. So harass your learning, education, technology, IT people. They'll love you for it, but shouldn't worry about the time, I think.
Yeah. Just in response to that, I actually used the quiz mechanism in Moodle to do a similar kind of thing. And in some ways, those structures that you showed, if there were some preset structures, you could actually fill it with the content, because it's about what you're asking students to do and the variety of ways of engaging. So I wonder whether that might be a way to enable many more people to use that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a point. So Rob Brooks is one of my co-educators in the course. He was the one who said to me, you should just think of students as adults, right? I mean, if they don't want to engage, they don't want to engage. So that, originally the HB5 thing, I talked to Lisa and Rob about basically forcing students to break away from the couch and click on the screen. And that was all the objective is just to get them attention span. And then Rob said that, and I was like, yeah, that's a fair point. And so, we're still doing it, but we're doing it as you're shifting your learning content to a different context. So, verbal or, text and all that sort of stuff. It all kind of helps people, encapsulate this more effectively. Some people were better with activities. Some people just preferred to watch the video, and it captures all those people together, I suppose. That's the other advantage to it. Yes, the captions are not cheap, but they're not overly expensive. Depends on, there's a US company that does it. The local hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I actually got an American company to do it. They were extremely quick. It's extremely accurate. I can't figure out how they did it, but it was affordable. Leanne, the assessments did change a bit. It wasn't one-to-one from the 2017, the lowest, the credit median, to the HD and the distinction median. The main thing that we got rid of was the final exam. We don't have a final exam anymore. So this Aspira, whatever the hell it is that I keep getting emails about, I'm not interested. Stop emailing me about it, because we don't have a final exam. I don't like exams. I hated exams when I was a student. I hate marking them. And the students don't really like them as well. It's really high stakes. So that was the main change that we did. And we do have additional changes in terms of science behind the documentary and things like that. I mean, if your question's about, is the data comparable between 2021 and 2017 because the assessments are not the same? The answer is no, they're not the same. So, perhaps that's a flaw in that data plot. But if you're asking about specific strategies that I changed in terms of assessments, then it's very specific to the course, and I can talk to you about it in person if you wish, but they were a little different. not 100% different. There was about 2/3 overlap between the assessments in face-to-face to the online asynchronous. Mike hates breakout rooms too. Yeah, so then I know, so Carol, I get it in terms of the cameras on and off, and adding, Peter, your own profile pics can help, certainly from an educator's perspective. But I guess we're content deliverers, students are our customers. Am I interested in Telstra getting a good experience for me as a customer, or am I interested in having Telstra be good customer service to me? That's the way I view it. Couldn't give a hell about Telstra. So, I'm okay about trying to communicate with lots of initials on the screen. It's exhausting and it's hard, but, I don't, it's so complicated. And as you can see in the chat, you can see that there's quite a bit going on there. And Mike brings up that point about YouTube Live. Basically, students are engaging in platforms where you don't have to have the camera on. And as I said before, this whole camera on and live lectures and breakout room sort of thing is a kind of construct that's happened in the last couple of years. This is not traditional online teaching, which has been pretty effective before. So maybe it's just a cultural thing, as I said. And I think, yep, we got that one. Is there also a conversation around how lack of interaction on a student's part does not prepare them for future work environments? So, do you have a thought on, what do you think? I'm just referring to Nora because I've been talking a lot and Nora's probably got a better opinion.
I'll just unmute myself. Yeah, I guess if you're not communicating well in class, it could potentially have a negative impact on your experience in the future. But I think it also depends on how comfortable you are already. I mean, public speaking is different from being in an online lecture, and that's probably more relevant to doing meetings and stuff online. But in different environments and in different contexts, you may feel more or less comfortable just engaging with the whatever the online thing is. So you might not necessarily feel comfortable speaking up in class if a question has been asked that you don't necessarily know. But it is, I think it's a bit different from in a meeting where maybe you were hired, a work meeting where you were hired because you did know about that topic already. So I think that probably does just depend on the student. Sorry, that's not the most concise answer, but yeah.
It's an interesting question, right? When students go into the workforce and they're supposed to be working in teams, and maybe they're like, just personal communication skills, right? Working amongst yourselves is one of the things that we teach in, independent group projects that we used to run in the course, for example. And yeah, it depends what the work environment they're walking into is. That's another question, right? Things are changing. This is why this whole hybrid push that we're doing, where we're basically putting a band-aid on online stuff. We're all expecting we're going to go back to face-to-face stuff, and maybe we will, maybe we won't. But that hybrid thing is just not going to work for a lot of people, and those students, it's inequitable for those students that are online unless it's very effectively done. But yeah, kind of interaction, that live interaction does matter. Having all your, seeing your faces right now, it's just awesome. It's not a screen of initials. I think it's a philosophical question as much as it is a pragmatic question, but it's an awesome question. I don't know if there's any conversations about it. I think there needs to be, that's for sure. Yeah, some suggestions about the policy of cameras, blurred backgrounds as well. You're still seeing your face and stuff like that. So the other thing is that, kids today are very much on the social platforms and all that sort of stuff, right? So I kind of thought, in talking to my partner about this the other day, surely this generation should be the ones that just have their cameras on all the time. And she pointed out that, and she's not a social network platform user at all, that is hyper curated. You're presenting a very curated version of yourself to the world, even via Facebook. We all do it. Live cameras on, it's a very uncurated. Now you can spend hours, you know, making sure that you look great on camera and all that sort of stuff, but you know, most people are not going to do that. So even having blurred backgrounds, you're still seeing your profile. Sometimes it's an issue. It's complicated, right?
Sorry, I feel so passionately about this. I have to interject for a moment.
Yeah, go for it.
Because my thing actually is around culture change. And if we constantly feed into the existent culture that we've created up until this point, we're not doing anything different to enable a more empowered sense of self in our students moving forward. I put there a big comment, and I'm actually writing my apologies and that I have to head off. So I'm going to sort of do a little low-key on you, drop a bomb and run away cackling maniacally. But what I wrote was, you know, that culture change is something we need to invite, cultivate, and be nice about, and understand that, you know, just as you've done, you know, be human yourself, but also about our learning processes. Invite people to make mistakes, honor and acknowledge what they get wrong as fabulous as much as what they get right. We need to have the courage to demonstrate our own humanity in its fullness, and not always feel like we have to have the answers as well. Like, there's so much to it, but it also comes down to how we present ourselves and what we like. Yeah, I just want culture change. We can do it. Every one of us can contribute to that, and it comes down to the little seeds that you're willing to plant and the way, like, what you're willing to take a stand for, and whether you feed into what exists and perpetuate it, or whether you make your classroom, whatever space that's in, the counterculture to the world. That's my thing.
Yeah, absolutely. 100% agree.
Love you all. Loki running.
Thank you.
I'm going to watch the rest of the conversation later. Thank you, everyone, so much.
Lots of good suggestions in the chat. So if any of you aren't actually monitoring the chat, just have a go. Just reread this after the talk's done. There's lots of interesting stuff going on. Yeah, some people are fully back to face-to-face, and Claire's saying back to face-to-face classes in Canberra. That's interesting. So we have a lot of pressure here to do face-to-face, and then, you know, case numbers go up and the university freaks out, and then we're all expected to go back online again. So I guess this is the solution of hybrid learning, I suppose. Do you find engagement with, so this is from Simone, from asynchronous versus synchronous varies depending on the level of the learner. I think perhaps a difference between undergraduate versus postgraduate might be a difference. I only teaching to the undergraduate. I haven't really seen a difference. I actually do a bit of outreach stuff, work with students at high school as well via Teams and Zoom. You know, they seem to be just as comfortable doing what they're doing as the undergraduates that I teach in the courses. But yeah, I think so. I don't know if you noticed in those hybrid images that I presented, they're very at the kind of sort of late 20s, early 30s, maybe even older than that, students, if they're students, if it's not a kind of like Teams corporate meeting. So they're not very realistic of what most of our teaching's like. So I don't know, is there a difference between the level? Doesn't appear to be to me, but I don't think I've got the sampling enough to be able to say. Do you think that asking students to use a photo for their profile rather than a blank screen or an avatar increases the community of learning for the class and increases engagement? I think we've been talking from the perspective of educators, right? Talking to like a whole wall of initials, but I don't know, I might actually ask Nora from a student perspective what it would mean to have profile pictures or an avatar relative to initials in a breakout room situation.
I mean, I like the profile picture idea, but it also at that point does come down to the same thing with the having the cameras on at all, is that some students may just be shy and not want to do it. But personally, I like the idea of if you can't have the camera on, having a photo or even a photo of someone's pet, because that's one of the best icebreakers, I suppose, I found in online learning, is someone would see an animal in the background and go, "Oh, is that your dog?" And then they'd bring the dog up to the screen and then everyone would just feel more comfortable and start talking. But I think, yeah, I do like the photo idea, but then maybe not everybody would feel the same way.
Isabel, this is the question is, do any students come to class for face-to-face teaching? The course for animal behaviour, the main thing that I was talking about, it's entirely online, so that's I can't really answer that. But in terms of some of the other courses that we do, we have the lectures are still online, and a lot of the it's kind of flipped, classroom sort of format. But we get basically 90 to 100% turning up for the practicals. So we will have a lot of students in our second year evolutionary ecology course, all sitting in lab coats, crammed into a lab space. I'm not sure how that figures in terms of the distancing thing, but they wouldn't give us a bigger room, so there you go. So they do. Look, so when we get my experience comments back for the third year fully online course, because it takes so long to update the university manual actually still describes the course as entirely face-to-face and what it was like back in 2016. And they will say, "Oh, well, I thought this course was face-to-face, and I was really disappointed at the start to hear that it was fully online." And then the whole point was but now I've taken the course and I loved it. It was great. So the fact it was online was okay. But their point is that my point is that they do seem to crave that want to come onto campus. Now, I guess for Nora, she started out university life and it's a life change, right? You're growing up, you go from high school into a university environment, you get to meet new friends. Some of us might actually meet our significant others and just have a network of friends that we, stay with for the rest of our lives. So if we're not coming onto campus to do a face-to-face practical or something like that, those students are missing out on that. I have, somewhat related to this, noticed that this year is the students who started their university in 2020 and now they're in their third year, and this cohort is very different to every other cohort I've ever taught. The majority of them doing great, but a lot of them seem to be having some serious mental health things going on. So it's quite striking. You always have a cohort, a small proportion of your students, regardless of face-to-face or not. But this year is quite striking. I'm worried about next year. Next year will be the third year students who did their HSC during COVID and have effectively had their entire university career. At least this cohort this year had a month on campus. So I don't know. I'll just ask Nora about what her thoughts are about wanting to do face-to-face.
Yeah, I definitely miss face-to-face teaching when I'm not there. Obviously, asynchronous learning is extremely convenient, but especially with labs and tutorials, doing them in person is just so much better. It's nice to be able to actually talk to real people and meet new people. And I guess what a lot of people do care about as well, like Terry was saying, is the university life. If you go into like maybe the Facebook groups or undergrad Facebook groups, a lot of people who are new coming into campus, one of the biggest questions they'll ask is, what's the campus life compared to maybe UCID or UTS? And obviously that's not the biggest question that a lot of people do have, but it does come up a fair bit. And so I think people, if you're at home, you will want to come in eventually. You just be sick of being at home, I guess.
And I guess I'm surprised no one's actually asking the question about what do I prefer? Do I prefer face-to-face teaching or online teaching? And I love engaging with students in the classroom. Talking to them during practicals is the highlight of my day. Do I like online versus face-to-face? I'll ask my own question. I would say I like them both. My personality, oddly enough, kind of, I'm not a people person in the sense of, social butterfly. So I do like the online environment, perhaps for some of the reasons that Nora said, for convenience and the fact that you can access it, but also because, I don't necessarily need to engage with people all the time, but I think it would be wonderful if we could have both. I'd love to be doing face-to-face teaching as well. Just coming towards the end. Some comments about the turning up the speed of the lectures in terms of, wow, they actually do that. What's the impact on, deeper learning and all that sort of stuff if you're listening at times too. Yeah, and look, Helen's made a point that, as a native English speaker, still often run the closed captions and subtitles when watching English language TV shows and movies, because I find it really helpful to my understanding. So, I mean, it's a version of accessibility that's, it's not just about language as well. It's also, people who are hearing impaired, for example. I mean, it's all sorts of things. But just having that second, so you're hearing it and then you have it on the screen there, it just depends on how your brain works in terms of learning content. It can reinforce it as well. So perhaps it's not just about foreign language speaking. Lots of discussion in the chat about all sorts of stuff. Do you find your experience in teaching online as rewarding and satisfying to teaching on face-to-face? Good, somebody did ask the question. Thank you, Seppi. Yes, mixed feelings. I like them both. Yay, death to exams. I'm with you, Tom. Simone's made a point that, shorter is better in terms of lectures. I don't think people are able to engage deeply in a 50-minute lecture recording anyway. Look, I don't, that's the same case of in person. Again, I feel like we're talking about stuff that's not online. It's like if I'm sitting in a lecture theatre, it's just as easy for me as a student to just disengage and start thinking about what I'm going to have for dinner tonight 10 minutes in than, if I'm watching an online lecture, except the online lecture we can see as educators, students don't know this, or perhaps you don't even know this, but if you do Echo 360, you get all this analytics and you can see every student and what their habits are at viewing and how much they've viewed and all that sort of stuff. It's kind of creepy, but yeah.
Terry, could you post instructions on how to access that data? Because I just logged into Echo 360 and it wasn't immediately obvious.
Yeah, I can. The one thing I will say is that you will only get the last 12 months. So if you're looking at your course that you taught in semester 2 this year, but from last year, you won't have it because it won't be there. So if you've got lectures that are in Echo 360 now that are within that 12-month window, you just go into the Echo 360 Studio bank and you can click, I think it's literally called analytics. I'd have to have a look for you, Daniel, but I will do so, and I can send that on to you. And I think that's coming to the end. If anybody's got any last questions they would like to ask. Wow, lots of discussion. So Peter's Peter Neal's made a point. So isn't describing educators as content creators playing into the misconception that learning is purely about the transfer and consumption of content? Yes, right. Totally acknowledge exactly what you've just said. And I guess the idea of that forum engagement, that learning community, that's where the learning community comes in. If it's just about creating content and throwing it out into the ether, yeah, that's not going to achieve learning outcomes in students. Some students will be fine with that. A lot of students need to have that learning community to be able to engage, you know, have that penny drop, so that they can you know, get that learning. Often, you know, I keep telling my kids, you know, making mistakes is good, right? Because then you know what you did wrong and you learn. If you get it straight away, then you haven't really learned anything because you already knew what it was. So that kind of feedback. So perhaps it also gets back into, it's not just content creation, it's about that learning community, but also providing that feedback at those critical moments so that students get affirmation, confirmation, I should say, about being on the right track, but also not being on the right track. And again, students feel that being wrong is bad, right? But for me personally, when I'm, you know, I really want to teach them that getting it wrong is where your learning experience is, you know, maximized. So that's where reflection also comes in as well. That's kind of reflecting on your own ideas about the content. So acknowledge your point there, Peter, absolutely.
Thanks, Terry. Sorry, I was having trouble with getting my camera on there.
Oh, yeah.
I think I've done online teaching in the past, like totally online teaching, and I think the thing I've struggled with is that sense of community. And, you know, like I ran an in-person design studio this year for the first time in 2 years, and it was just a joy. Like it was joyful to actually be in the same space with people and really feel that community, and you could see the community there. And I had to learn how to talk over and, like, you know, use all my room control techniques again. But and I think, yeah, I don't know, maybe I'm just an extrovert and I find online teaching just tiring because there's none of that personal interaction, real-time personal interaction. It's just emails and messages. But yeah, and so I think for me that's a real struggle as I try to think through how to what is community in a purely online course.
Yeah, I guess the definition is peer-to-peer interaction and peer-to-educator interaction, right? But there's no distinction about whether that's live in the context of being in the same room or whether it's via email as well. No, like I said, I love the practicals. Was a highlight of my day. It was exhausting, but just going around and, you know, just having chat to students about all sorts of things, not even about the content and about the course. It's just nice to just, you know, talk with other human beings. And this is the kind of, you know, the thing that we cannot solve by doing hybrid stuff. And asynchronous, you can get that learning experience up. So the objective here is for them to achieve those learning outcomes. If we want to have the social aspect to that kind of learning experience, then that's kind of a different ball game as well. So I guess perhaps that's where this kind of synchronous online teaching has really come out. I do kind of have to wonder whether, like, you know, perhaps before when you were doing your online teaching prior to 2020, it was all asynchronous and things like that. Now in 2020, we had a whole bunch of synchronous face-to-face educators suddenly forced into the online environment. And what do they all want to do? They wanted to shoehorn whatever they did in person to the online environment, which is just doomed to fail to begin with. And so this is also added to this live lecture thing, and live kind of forum formats like that. So, I mean, if we were all in the same, so there's a lot more engagement here than I would ever get if we do live stuff. But still, it would be awesome if we were all in the same room, just you know, having a chat about, you know, life, universe and everything related to what we've been talking about, right? So, yeah, look, it's just, is there a solution? I don't know. Maybe it's again, goes back to that cultural shift. Maybe we're just old Luddites that it's just going to be, you know, replaced in the future by educators that are more used to this sort of teaching environment.
And just on the cameras thing, I hated having to use Zoom on my old laptop because it wouldn't do virtual backgrounds. Loved Teams, and it went headfirst to Teams because the virtual background worked. But yeah, hated having to use Zoom for exactly the reason that I didn't, you know, what's going on in my house. Yeah, so it's interesting, that sort of aspect.
I guess, look, I don't, so you go onto my YouTube channel, some of my lectures are there and some of my intros to those case studies are there for the you know, the experts and things like that. People, like, I don't really think about it. I do now in high, you know, I have thought about it when I was recording these lectures in my home environment. Got kids things in the background, you got Lego in the corner, and again, occasionally you'll, you know, if it's, you know, during a meeting or something, you'll have my kids going behind. But I wouldn't record lectures when the kids are home because, you know, because I am conscious of the privacy thing and it's just a different world in this sort of a format. But I'm not concerned about my background, and for me and I think it's specific to my context, right? Because a single parent, you know, you're in a professional environment, people scheduling meetings at like school pickup times and stuff like that. I'll have a meeting with the, you know, Deputy Vice Chancellor, and I will not have a filter on the background because I want him to know that, you know, I've got a life outside work. I'm here in this meeting, but it's all good. But, you know, people need to recognise that we're, you know, we're all career driven, perhaps, but, you know, life gets in the way, and, you know, perhaps the flexibility of these days makes it a bit okay to be just more flexible and that sort of thing. I don't know. So I don't know whether that's impacted how professional people view me when I'm in these sorts of meetings. If they can see kids' paintings on the background and Lego in the corner, I don't know. I mean, who knows? But yeah, I can understand where you're coming from in terms of your backgrounds as well. It's just, all right. So I think that's it. Down to the bottom. The link to the recording is being posted by Edith. So if there's any other last questions. All right, great. Thank you so much for turning up. It's been a wonderful discussion. I can't believe it. All right, so thank you, everyone. If you do have any questions, you can always email us. It's up on the screen. Just look us up. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Terry. Thanks so much for coming along and presenting at Connections. It was fabulous. Bye.
See ya.
Thank you. It was amazing.